The perimeter of blood and steel about the port of Hungnam is shrinking fast. Hard pressed by an invading Chinese Communist army that swarms forward with reckless disregard for its casualties, the last of the United Nations troops carry out their orderly withdrawal from military positions that are no longer tenable. The delaying actions which have exacted such a high toll of the pursuers are finally drawing to a close. Most of these men who have stuck it out until the last hours before boarding the waiting ships are elements of the 3rd Division. Troops evacuated are being shipped to Pohang and Busan. A nitrate factory smokestack is blown up by an engineer demolition team to prevent its use as a landmark by the Reds to pinpoint vital targets in the beach area. Floating artillery holds back an enemy which will finally be allowed to take possession of the heap of rubble for which it has paid so dearly. Tons of demolition charges are lowered under the piers and pilings that line the harbor front. It will be a long time before the occupying enemy troops will be able to put these harbor facilities to any good use. Around the warehouses on the docks, engineers lay out a hose that is filled with TNT. Many lengths of the explosive hose are coupled together and laid close to the foundations of the buildings. In the UN's new scorched earth tactics, few buildings are left in which the Chinese Reds will be able to hide from observation or air attack. Primer cord is attached to the hose and paid out to the last safe position at the water's edge. The last remaining troops board landing craft that are armed with machine guns. Detonation devices left in the abandoned city are ticking off their last seconds. An ammunition dump goes up, thundering and crackling as it illuminates the sky with a spectacular display of fireworks. The docks are destroyed. The remains of Hungnam are left to the enemy. A few miles north of Seoul, other UN troops are also pulling back in the face of overwhelming Chinese military manpower. The situation requires the entire 8th Army to be redeployed. Men and machines move back from positions which they had occupied before the vast Chinese hordes had swarmed across the Manchurian border and precipitated an entirely new war. As UN troops withdraw below the 38th parallel, it is estimated that a force of fully 100,000 Chinese are preparing to close in on Seoul. The new lines, which will be commanded by General Ridgway, are regrouping well to the south, where our troops can avoid the danger of entrapment. South Korean guerrilla troops act as the rear guard as they move along in the withdrawal. The once proud capital city of Seoul is soon to be occupied by the enemy. Its last remaining inhabitants are frightened, discouraged, and depressed during a Christmas season in which the words, "Peace on earth, goodwill toward men," become a mockery. The Far East Air Force Combat Cargo Command takes on a mission of mercy. At Kimpo Airfield near Incheon, a precious cargo is assembled for evacuation from battle-torn Korea. Nearly 1,000 Korean orphans and waifs of war are taken aboard C-54s for transfer to an island refuge off the South Korean coast. Aged 6 months to 11 years, these helpless victims of war were to have been settled at a model child welfare center in Seoul under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel R.L. Blaisdell, 5th Air Force chaplain. But with the fall of Seoul now imminent, they are hurried off by air to a sanctuary far from the scene of any future hostilities. With the help of Red Cross, YMCA, and mission officials, the youngsters were gathered up from many points in the war-torn nation. The tiny passengers, many of whom are suffering from starvation, whooping cough, tuberculosis, and other serious illnesses, are cared for with special tenderness by the airmen and nurses. Last-minute evacuation by air is necessary because a Korean ship, which was to have removed the children from Incheon, failed to make its appearance.
Following General Walker's death, General Matthew Ridgway is greeted by South Korean officers as he arrives at the front to assume command of United Nations field forces. With hundreds of thousands of Chinese and North Korean Reds pouring down from the hills, the capital city of Seoul was evacuated. Outnumbered by overwhelming waves of communists, the troops sought new positions in an effort to halt the red tide. As they withdrew, warships and transports stood by at Incheon for evacuation. Seoul was left in ruins. Even civilian refugees helped to fire the abandoned towns so that no possible advantage remained to aid the communist invaders. Masses of South Koreans sought safety behind UN lines. These pictures of Russian jet planes are from newsreels captured in Korea. These are the latest Soviet fighter planes, including MiGs and Yaks, which have helped spur the drive of the Reds. But United States Panther jets and the 670-mile-an-hour Sabre jet have been giving the Red Sky Raiders more than they can send. This Russian specimen really takes it on the chin in a dogfight with a United States jet near Manchuria. The superior firepower of the Yank gunners sounds the death knell for the Red fighter, which goes down at 6,000 feet. The invader still faces a hard-hitting opponent. Retreating United Nations forces guard the Imjim River as the onrushing hordes of Reds mass for the capture of Seoul. Despite superior firepower and the last word in weapons, they are forced to give ground before an avalanche of manpower sweeping down below the 38th parallel. The pressure on Seoul increases as the Allies conduct an orderly withdrawal, taking with them the major portion of their arms and equipment. Faced with a force estimated up to 500,000, Seoul is put to the torch and evacuated as President Syngman Rhee's government fled to Busan on the southeast coast. And for the third time during the conflict, pathetic bands of refugees in the bitter cold flee from the Reds with the innocent pawns seeking safety they know not where. But among them are North Koreans infiltrating the UN lines, and no chances are taken with concealed weapons. Here is the backwash of a war for which world statesmen are desperately seeking a solution. What began as police action against aggression now threatens world peace as Red China unleashes the torrent of her manpower.